Nikkie Hanley is she's one of our own. She graduated back in 2015, I think. She is currently a general manager for Nature's Remedy of Massachusetts. And in her job, she does quite a bit of business writing. So she does a lot of digital marketing and in-store marketing as well. She does a lot of copywriting for her website, technical writing for standard operating procedures. And so we're really excited to have Nikkie and to talk about these sort of business opportunities in a very burgeoning, fast-growing, interesting, perhaps, market that is the legalized cannabis industry. And I'll just let Nikkie take it away.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you all. It is a real pleasure to be here and to kind of share my experience. I have incredibly fond memories of Coastal and especially the English department, and it definitely has shaped the professional that I am, the experiences that I had. So yeah, super grateful and lucky for that experience and happy to be here talking to you all. Just like Dr. Hasty said, I do a lot of writing in my current role. And I've done a lot of writing kind of in my whole experience in the cannabis industry. When I started out, I was just super interested in effects and getting information out there for myself, gathering information. And so that kind of turned to getting information out there to be able to be passed on to consumers. So I started with like writing descriptions of products, effects, flavor profiles, things like that. I was immediately super interested in the way people spoke about cannabis and the words that they used, the linguistics behind talking about something that has been kind of behind closed doors for so long. There's a lot of regional slang words, a lot of language around cannabis that is different depending on where you go. And so that was really interesting to me. From the East Coast and moving to the West Coast, where I started in the cannabis industry, people used just a lot of different words. I think I spent a couple years just like studying that on my own, but my own studies of like, this is a little weird because I feel like I'm talking a little bit about like drug slang, like buying an eighth, and people in Massachusetts call that a slice, like a slice of pizza. I never heard that on the West Coast. And so, yeah, just really interesting. And that is just comes from, people love pizza in New England and New York. So I'm sure that's where that comes from. But so the linguistics and again, regional dialects was super interesting, and just like talking about the product and like the day to day. And then I also train a lot on communicative competence and just like knowing your audience. And so using words that they're comfortable with, and also like getting to know what somebody is looking for. People use the word pen to talk about like a vape cartridge. And some people are talking about the cartridge itself, and some people are talking about the battery. And so just the language around, again, a new and burgeoning industry is fascinating to me, not unlike I think of like the tech industry, where a lot of words and our new slang and how we talk with acronyms and whatnot, like really came out of that. And so just my experience in the English department and being an English major is what helps, I think, really keep me interested in my job, because I'm interested in little quirks like that. That I think is the main thing that I think about on a day-to-day basis that really ties me back into my English major roots. I'll tell you, I've multiple times wished that I had taken a technical writing course with Dr. Kellogg, because I do a lot of standard operating procedures writing and business writing. And that's something that is super outside of my comfort zone, but knowing how to string words along and writing something out and then paring it down, editing it back to take out some of what I think are helpful adverbs when looking at from a business perspective don't really need to be in there. So editing is definitely crucial. I also found that editing was incredibly beneficial in the resume writing process for me, especially in today's job market. And I'm sure a lot of you have some experience in that already. There's a lot of people looking for jobs. And so how do you get your resume to stand out? And I think this would be true in any industry, but in my industry, it's putting your job specific skills and experiences on there, but also having your personality come through on the page, even if that's just in your objective or in your cover letter or in the design. And that takes time, right? You kind of throw it all up on the page and then pare it back. And maybe you have a resume, different resume for different jobs. And that's something that I certainly didn't start off with multiple resumes, but as I've continued my career, looked for jobs in marketing or jobs in retail, jobs in content creation. I ended up with different resumes for each one of those jobs. The design might be the same, but the skills that I really highlight in the different previous jobs that I've had, I would definitely pare down and highlight different ones depending on what job I'm going for. That's kind of a brief overview, I think, of what I do and some of the skills that I learned as an English major and learned at my time at CCO.
Does anyone have any specific questions then, and we can steer this in a more specific way?
I kind of was wondering if y'all hired online at all, just out of curiosity. Like, is there any remote work to be done?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say there's definitely remote work. There's not a lot. I was going to bring that up actually at the beginning of this conversation. I mean, I've been in person working this, for the last year and a half to 2 years. There is, though, marketing can be done remotely. States right now, as they're sort of coming online and, looking at what legalized cannabis looks like in these different states. There's a lot of proposal writing and legal conversations and things like that are all happening remotely on like Zoom conferences and yeah, I'm sure like Teams meetings and things like that. So those would be the main areas of remote work right now, is especially in states where the groundwork is still being laid. Yeah, a lot of that right now.
Yeah, Nikki, just to follow up on what you were just saying about that proposal writing, because that seems something, that English majors would be, really well suited for. Did you do any of that at the beginning of getting into this? Or can you talk about like how would we go about getting into like a proposal writing sort of?
Yeah, so I think right now it's in a lot of that falls under like the legal and like policy realm, but also for specific businesses, if you're applying to a state or a city or even a town and you're writing your business proposal or just writing like about what you're going to bring to the table, to the town, why you're the right fit for the business there. And most of the time, like, the from my experience, you have sometimes it's the ownership that's actually writing that, but a lot of times they're hiring somebody, they're looking for their marketing department to do that. They have PR teams who are writing things like that as well. As far as getting into it, I think it's about having those job search notifications on. If you have a place where you want to live, you are interested in a certain industry, have that on, and just kind of start firing off applications when you're ready.
From Dr. Pastor here on the chat. I don't know if you've got that pulled up, but she's asking how the kinds of research you were asked to do in the papers you wrote for your English classes translate into the work that you do. Like, do you have any? Did you learn certain strategies you found helpful, and is there anything else you wish you'd covered that wish had been covered in your classes? So, series of questions there, both for how you use the things we taught and what you wish that we would have taught you.
Hey,
Yeah.
Nikki, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate you being here. I'm Dr. Denise Pastor, and I run the first year composition program, and we teach research writing in those classes, and as you know, in our upper level classes too. So as you were talking, I'm just imagining that doing research is a big part of what you do. So I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because the research piece is huge. And yeah, I'm surprised I didn't mention that earlier, but it's something, yeah, I do all the time. Again, lucky that I really enjoy doing it, because it certainly has helped make me successful in this role. I think that the intersectional research has been super beneficial for me. Like, I can think of in particular when I was at Coast, I think I was a junior, and I was in a class with Dr. Childs, and it was a linguistics class, and I was writing about they, them pronouns at the time. And so, bringing in, yeah, linguistics and social equity, and at that same juncture was something that I wish I had more experience doing, but that's one that really stands out to me, and something that I work on all the time is like, how do I bring cannabis knowledge into retail training? That's something that I work on all the time right now, is training programs. Yeah, the strategies for me are really just note taking, highlighting, writing everything down, and paring back. And that might not be the quickest approach, but as I think one thing that I learned as an English major too is, like, if you skip the reading, it's not going to go well. So don't skip the reading. Try not to take shortcuts as much as possible, because the information that you get by just kind of taking your time really can be beneficial, if not for that project, another project down the road. Yeah, but I love that question. I truly love to do research. And I wish that I had more time to do like real research projects and proposals on cannabis, because the market is rich for that right now. I was just looking at a cannabis research journal last night that is taking scientific papers, but they're also taking like creative papers, historical, papers on cannabis history, of course, clinical studies and things like that. But that's a realm that is huge right now. I was looking up cannabis information resources. I do that all the time, trying to create like a library for my team for cannabis resources, and there's not a lot. And so that is something that I would love to have the time to pursue more of. And so I think that note taking and bookmarking sources, and copying and pasting, and kind of having a running like annotated bibliography, or having a running bibliography of things that I've used as resources is going to be super beneficial down the road.
I wanted to follow up on something you said earlier about communicative competence. So you mentioned that in the beginning, and just so that, everyone at home's on the same page, can you talk a little bit more about what that is and how that plays a role in the kinds of communication that you have to do in your job?
So that to me is like it's communication across generations, demographics, ability and comprehension level. And so it's in my industry and in general in the world, where we encounter all kinds of different types of people from different backgrounds. And so in my opinion, or in my experience, really adjust to the method of communication that is most comfortable for somebody else. And so that's where the understanding slang and dialects that people might use when they're talking about a certain product, working with folks who speak a different language, and maybe you don't have anybody around who speaks that same language. And so being well versed enough to have a conversation with them, with a person, without making them feel inferior because they don't speak the same way that you do, or they don't use the same language that you do. That's really the main use of it, I think, in my realm and workplace right now, is just really every day working hard to communicate with folks and teaching my team methods to communicate with folks without making them feel like they're at fault when they're just in there trying to get a product, taking the ownership and like putting the impetus on yourself to figure out how to communicate with the person in front of you, especially again in an industry where we see people all the time who don't feel comfortable being in there, don't feel comfortable being in a dispensary, but they're in their 70s or 80s, and their doctor recommended that they come to the dispensary, but their doctor doesn't even know what to recommend. So they say, go in there, talk to the person there who knows what they're talking about. When you're a professional in an industry, even in the cannabis industry, there's a high level of talking about this plant and the way that it impacts people and flavor profiles, strains, terpenes, and then there's just a sort of layman level of communication that I think you need to be able to know how to do both, depending on what your audience is. I'm going to answer the question in the chat first. Was it challenging transitioning from being in college to a professional workplace? That's an interesting question. And I think I was probably lucky, just the industry that I chose. It wasn't particularly challenging from like a day-to-day perspective, but it was certainly not easy to go from having a dorm. I mean, I know we all pay for those things, but to go from having a dorm and knowing having a sort of a financial security when I was in college to being out on my own and being in the workplace. But honestly, I found I had a lot of success because I had a college education and was just, again, like had a kind of professional mindset from the get that frankly this industry really needs. It needs professionals. It needs people who are willing to work hard and also balance like a workplace culture and frankly like a bar or restaurant culture. And so I found that it really wasn't too difficult for the transition at first, but to continue to move forward and move up, it definitely took a level of self-discipline that I definitely had to learn in the first couple of years.
Sorry, I was muted before. I was trying to relay Dr. Port's question. So Dr. Port, can you ask your question again? I don't know how much of that you could hear, but she was saying, is it similar to like a like wine tasting and being able to, taste something and relate it to words and things like a sommelier would do?
I think that's exactly right. So within like probably the first month of working in cannabis, I think I had this, I had a thought that I've said out loud a few times where I was like, I want to go into the woods and just like nibble on all the different like types of bark and trees and leaves and just like try to understand all of these different frankly like plant flavors. And I think wine's similar, right? There's like nutty and woody and kind of smoky flavors. There's sweet and different kinds of berries or different kinds of fruits. And cannabis is exactly the same way. What we talk about a lot are they're called terpenes, and those are the flavor and aromatic molecules that are on every plant. They're found in every plant, some insects as well. And they make up like a lot of beauty products and shampoos and all kinds of things that we see in our household and day to day have terpenes. And so that's where a lot of these flavor profiles come from. But terpenes are a newer study, just like cannabis. Terpenes is what makes up essential oils. And so, just, kind of just starting to really break through in like the mainstream market, learning about those things, just like a sommelier, it comes from having and refining your nose and your sense of smell and also your sense of taste.
And there's another one I'm not sure if Dr. Howes was asking a question with this, but I'm going to turn it into a quick, well, I guess it is. So she's really interested in the language used currently to talk about cannabis, especially as it's sort of morphing from being illegal to legal, and how things are changing, especially when it's not legal everywhere and that sort of thing. So can you speak to some of that about how that relates to the way that you talk about it and the things that you do in your job?
Yeah. I think it is standardizing in some ways. Definitely has changed a lot. And so that's something that has been a big difference for me going from working in the industry, frankly, being around cannabis as a young person in Massachusetts and also in South Carolina. And then moving to Washington, where cannabis has been legal since like 1999, and then coming back over to the East Coast, the language around cannabis was very mature in Washington, where people were aware of and talking about terpenes. Talking about genetics and different methods of consumption. And then moving back over to the East Coast, now like Massachusetts is about 10 years into a legal cannabis landscape. And just now, I think people are starting to come around to not being just like THC percentage hunters, but instead like being interested in the genetics and the terpenes, because research really points to those are the things that impact the kind of effects you're gonna get, and if you're gonna like something or not necessarily like what the psychoactive content is. So it's definitely standardizing, but it's got quite a long way to go. The other interesting thing is just that everybody's experiences is different. The information that's out there is limited, and it's not in a super like consumer friendly format right now. And so if you wanted to learn something about cannabis, especially in how it impacts the body, like your best resources are clinical studies, and those are dense and not super fun for your kind of average person to read. But I think we're definitely moving towards a standardization. And the more people are able to have these conversations in a safe space, the better. And that's what I love about the dispensary setting, where people come in and can ask questions. And as you say, there's really no stupid question, because we're all learning, and we all have used different covert terms for so long, that it's nice to just kind of get them all out in the open and understand how professionals are talking about it.
Nikki, let me ask sort of in a different sort of question, not necessarily about the cannabis industry specifically, but can you just speak for a little bit about how you went about finding and applying for a job in like a business area like this? So going from being an English major to just doing that, like, and going out and like shopping around, like, what am I going to do as an English major in a business field?
Yeah, so for me, that really came from my initial experience in the cannabis industry, because I was interested in writing and creating these strain descriptions, and just really like spearheading our in-store like marketing and merchandising. I then had like, merchandising and management experience to put on my resume. And so when I decided I was ready to leave my first career job in Washington, I started looking at all kinds of different things. I was looking at sales. I was looking at marketing. I was looking at business management, and I think like just really expressing my desire to continue to work with people, to continue to do something that was in some sort of content creation or like communications realm, was really what helped me move down that path. Business just seemed like the place where there was a need for better communications, and a lot of that was like business to consumer communications. Yeah, I just kind of kept my eyes on those sorts of opportunities. As I said before, just turning on those job alerts on LinkedIn and Indeed, and I don't say this to scare anybody, but I think it's like a realistic look. I mean, I would throw out like 15 resumes and maybe hear back from 2 people, and I think that that's just a realistic look at the job market. Like they're not going to give an interview to every person who is qualified, or even to who might be the best fit for the job. It's about timing, a little bit about persistence, but I think it's about timing and writing a cover letter. That is like the really big thing that I've seen as an employer, and as an applicant. When you write a cover letter, even if it's just a couple sentences, it's just like, hey, looking to join a great team, and you should take a chance on me. That is something that like really can pique the right person's interest. I think the more I put myself out there, of course, the more comfortable I got with putting myself out there. But the more I put myself out there, the more responses I got. So there's definitely a numbers game involved there too. The resume writing was definitely something that I think, yeah, I mean, if I'm being honest, I wish that I had more exposure to resume writing and putting out job applications, even like before I was ready to take a career leap. I think like practicing interviewing, practicing resume writing is something that you can get started even before you're looking for a job. That's something that I even recommend to my friends and family who are like, I don't know if I like my job or whatever. I'm like, just put out your resume somewhere, even if you don't really want that job, just to practice an interview. Just so like if they call you back, then you can go and answer their questions, just practice for the job that you actually want.
Yeah, and that sort of anticipated the, I guess maybe the final question that I'll ask you was just about some advice that you can give us as English majors specifically on the next steps that we should take to get into just in general into the business world, because a lot of the things that you were mentioning about the jobs that you were looking for, like sales, marketing, and business management, aren't necessarily the things that our majors are thinking about when they're looking at jobs, and they're seeing jobs in sales and marketing and business management and thinking that that's not something they can apply for. So can you give us some advice on that?
Yeah, so I think for me, and I've asked this to folks before as well. Like most of the people that I have interviewed and hired are humanities majors, or definitely some psychology majors, photography. It's people who aren't necessarily weren't necessarily trained for sales or business, but are good with people, are interested in the way people work and the way people think, and who have passions outside of just work. And so those are things that I think are important to keep with you as you move into a professional industry. And I think I have been hired at my different roles more than anything for the person that I am, not necessarily for the amount of business experience that I have or career experience that I have, though I'm sure that that's part of it. I think being authentic and true to yourself is incredibly important. And so if you're an English major, and I'm probably similar to a lot of you who like, I'm going to major in English, but I have no idea what I'm going to do with that degree. The degree itself to me doesn't really matter, like what it's in. It's about what you're passionate about, and what kind of gets you going, keeps you waking up every day. And while of course I love my job, I love to read, and I love to write, and I love to research, and those are all things that I do in my free time, and they're things that I talk about in interviews. They are things that where it's appropriate and there's like a segue, I will put on a resume or in a cover letter. It's a little cheesy, but that's the real best advice that I could give, especially to somebody who's who is passionate about humanities area, English in particular, since I'm speaking with English majors, but is to really not lose that when you're applying for something, but instead think about why you were interested in that subject to begin with, and how that can help you in the next steps of your career. When I applied for a job in the cannabis industry, I wasn't thinking about linguistics. But initially, when I started living in a place where cannabis is legal, I was like, man, there are all these new words that I have never heard before about, about cannabis. So that is really interesting to me. And so at the time, that linguistic connection wasn't necessarily there, but it didn't take long. And that's what kind of keeps me, or at least one of the things that really keeps me interested in my job and talking with people. And I think that would be true in a lot of different industries, in a lot of different business realms, and career types. I'm sure that there are little things like that that are different, and that you wouldn't expect until you get into it.
Awesome. Well, we're pretty much near our time here, so unless anyone has a final question, you can just talk right over me. And thanks, Nikki, for spending your time talking to us about this, and thanks all of y'all for showing up. Thank you so much, Nikki. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you all. It's nice to see you, and happy to be here. Go Chance, and Good luck.